um, we can take a look at some of these conditions. All right, so go ahead and read over 651 yourself.
651.
Yeah, the first one on the page. Okay, so notice what's on this page. On the top here we have conditions for rectangles, and then right below that we have 3 conditions for rhombuses. And what this tells us, for the first one it says, if one angle of a parallelogram is a right angle, then the parallelogram is a rectangle. Okay? What does that mean? If I've got a parallelogram and one of the angles is a right angle, then it's a rectangle. Does that make sense? Go ahead and write that somewhere in your own words. Maybe like here or in the little margin. Just write somewhere in your own words. Write that out. If there's a right angle, then it's a rectangle. Does that make sense? So write it in your own words. Everyone should be writing something. So we're going to get in the practice here of like translating these theorems into our own words. I'm going to try and leave you guys some space. I don't feel like I left you enough space this time. I'm sorry. If you want to do it on the back, that's okay. But you should write it in your own words. So if one angle is a right angle, then the parallelogram is a rectangle. And what's the measure of a right angle again, guys? 90 degrees. So how would I say this? I would say if I've got a right angle makes it a rectangle. Hey, that's easy. Right angle, rectangle. It's pretty quick, snappy. All right, and the next one, 652. Go ahead and read that over for yourself. Okay. Sam, why don't you go ahead and read that out loud for us, please?
If the diagonals of a parallelogram are congruent, then the parallelogram is a rectangle.
Okay, can someone say that in their own words, please? Someone? Marcus. Want to word that into your own words? 652.
If the diagonals of a rectangle are congruent, then the parallelogram.
It's tough. It's tough. But that's why I want you guys to get in the habit of it. Close your computer, please. If the diagonals of a parallelogram are congruent, then the parallelogram is a rectangle. Okay, what does that tell us? If the diagonals are congruent, then it's a rectangle, right? Okay, so there you go. If the diagonals, I would say diagonals congruent, it's a rectangle. Does that make sense? You're not going to memorize this whole statement. So you got to be able to like have trigger words or at least a visual kind of thing in your mind that can help you. So for me, it's like, okay, diagonals congruent, rectangle. Does that make sense? Okay, so just translate that whole long statement into something that your brain can actually remember. Diagonals congruent, rectangle. Okay, and what does it mean if they're congruent?
They have the same. Same.
They have the same length. Yeah, same length. Okay, they're congruent. They have the same length. So that's a condition for a rectangle. Now, let's take a look at this example. And you guys don't have this example on your sheet. Let's take a look at that. Go ahead. If you can't read it, then come a little closer. But go ahead and read that over. Just the bold text, not all the text. Okay. So a contractor built a wood frame for the side of a house so that XY is congruent to WZ. So let me bring this into my little notepad here. So XY is congruent to WZ. So there you go. XY is congruent to WZ. And XW is congruent to YZ. XW is congruent to YZ. All right, that's cool. Can you guys even see that? It's kind of hard for you to see. But so this is congruent to this. All right. Using a tape measure, the contractor found that XZ equals WY. So what's XZ? Well, this is XZ and this is WY, and he says that those are equal. What are those two lines that I just drew? Diagonals. Okay. Why must the frame be a rectangle? Look on your paper. It has diagonals, but what do I know about the diagonals? Congruent. And what does it say for conditions of a parallelogram in 652? Yes. I love the muscular voices. If the diagonals are congruent, then
It must be a rectangle.
it's a rectangle. If the diagonals are congruent, then it must be a rectangle. Very good. Okay, so let's move forward in our page. Conditions for rhombuses, not rhombuses, but rhombuses. Rhombuses, and go ahead and read 653 to yourself, please. Nope. You're going to have another lesson after this, and then a review day, and then a test.
Wait, so no mini quiz today?
Oh, of course you're going to have a quiz today. Always. Okay, 653. Go ahead, Matthew. Read that out for us, please.
One pair of consecutive sides of a parallelogram are congruent, then the parallelogram is a rhombus.
Cool. One pair of consecutive sides is congruent, then it's a rhombus. What's a consecutive side? One right after another. It means it's consecutive, right? Does that make sense? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are consecutive numbers, right? So consecutive here, one right after another. If consecutive sides are congruent, then the parallelogram is a rhombus. Cool. 654. So how could you say this in easier terms? Put this into language in a way that's not going to force you to memorize that whole thing. Well, you can kind of just say consecutive sides congruent, right? Consecutive sides congruent, something like that. Consecutive sides congruent. That means it's a rhombus.
So that means the line EJ and EH are congruent, but it's not saying. Wait,
F and
Yeah,
EH
yeah.
are congruent.
okay, and then it's saying that FE and GH are congruent.
No, it's not.
It's saying EH is congruent to EH is congruent to EF. That's what those blue lines are. Those arrows are saying that FG and EH are parallel, and EF and GH are parallel. You see?
Wait, can you
Look up.
say that one more time?
Watch me. I'm
Okay.
doing things with my hands, and you're not looking. Okay, 1 second. So these blue lines show that EH is congruent to EF.
Okay,
These single arrows say that EF is congruent to HG. The double arrows say that FG is parallel to EH.
so then EF and GH are congruent. All the lines are
No.
congruent? Is that what it's trying to
No,
say?
parallel. The arrows say they're parallel. This line's parallel to this line. The two arrows mean that this line's parallel to that line. You see?
Oh, so it's not like the dashes that, like, if it had two dashes, then it's congruent. It's not the same.
No, because those are arrows.
So then the arrows just mean they're parallel.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Good. Question? Not just yet. Let's get through the list. Okay. All right. 654. Colton, go ahead and read that out for us, please.
But then diagonals are perpendicular.
Okay, this is an important one. This one comes up a lot, okay? If the diagonals are perpendicular, then the parallelogram is a rhombus, okay? The diagonals exist in every parallelogram, but if the diagonals are perpendicular, then it's a rhombus. Does that make sense? So if I see, oh, here's a parallelogram, and I see that the diagonals are perpendicular, then I know it's a rhombus. So what's the way to kind of convert that? Diagonals perpendicular, that's a rhombus. Okay. And then what's that last one there? Go ahead and read that to yourself. 655, please. Go ahead and read that over to yourself. Six, five, five. Olivia, how'd you read that one for us, please?
If one diagonal of a parallelogram bisects a pair of opposite angles, then the parallelogram is a rhombus.
Okay, so you see how much language that is? I almost got lost like here, right? So we got to convert that. You see what I'm doing? I'm converting this language into something short that I can understand. What is it showing? What's this line from F to H? What's that called? Diagonal. What's it doing to these angles? Bisecting them. So if a diagonal bisects the angles, it's a rhombus. You see? If a diagonal bisects, it's a rhombus. Does that make sense? If a diagonal bisects the angles,
It's a rhombus.
yes. Rhombus. Remember, all three of these on this second little chart thing, or second little table, are all for rhombus. These are conditions for rhombuses, whereas the previous two were conditions for rectangles. Okay, so what are the three conditions for a rhombus? Consecutive sides are congruent, diagonals are perpendicular, and diagonals bisect opposite angles. Those are conditions for a rhombus. Okay, any questions about that? Yeah? Oh, yeah, for sure. So, we're going to just do one example. Just take a look at something real quick and we'll talk it over. And then we will we'll go ahead. So, let's take a look in the book, Reading Rainbow. Okay, so this is actually a proof. We're not going to do a proof, but I'm gonna talk this over with you. So let's take a look at it. So it says given JKLM is a parallelogram, JL bisects KJM and KLM. So let me show that. It bisects, the diagonal bisects these two angles. So there you go, bisects there and bisects there. It says JKLM is a rhombus. Okay, do I even need to prove it? What did I just say about a diagonal? If a diagonal bisects the opposite angles, then it's a rhombus, okay? So this is just going to go through it here, okay? All right? So this goes through a whole proof here, and I'm not going to march through every single step here, but I just want you to see that the whole thing that this is basically doing is saying, hey, if this is a diagonal and it bisects those angles, then it means it's a rhombus. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So what this is proving to us is the condition that we just saw. Every one of these conditions has a proof. We're not going to go through the proof, but what we are going to say is that we have to understand these conditions exist. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? Okay, if you're interested in the proof, you can always take a look in your book. You guys ready to do some practice?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I use the bathroom before we start?
Wait,
Um,
practice like Kahoot, or-
Yeah, we're about to Kahoot.
Can I use the bathroom?
We're about to
Can you
make
do
it a
in
hoot.
Teams if you want?
No. You can use the bathroom, but you're going to be late for the Kahoot. Okay. You guys ready to play? You guys can play the Kahoot however you want. It is just for your learning. It is not for any points. Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, sorry about that, Priscilla. Log in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Wow.
Everyone is Ollie. We are all one. Good. Is this parallelogram is this a parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, or a square? Okay, give all names that apply. Okay, so this one, we notice it's got a 90-degree angle, so that makes it a rectangle. Okay, it's a rectangle, but no matter what, if it's a rectangle, it's also a parallelogram. Okay, it's a 90-degree angle. We saw that the diagonals bisect each other. There you go. Nice. Is this a parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, or square? Give all names that apply. And if the person who's going to do last, could just hold off so it doesn't close out. So, okay, whoever's going to do it now, just hold off. All right, look. What do I have here? I've got angle, side, angle. You see this? You guys remember conditions for the congruence of triangles? One of them was angle, side, angle. Well, what does that mean about these two triangles? They must be congruent. So therefore, all these sides are congruent, right? Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so if all of these sides are congruent, then I know it's got to be, well, I think I put the wrong answer to this one, but if all the sides are congruent, then I know that it must be a rhombus, right? But it could also be a square as well. It could also be a square as well, depending upon what would I have to know about the interior angles in order for it to be a square? Yeah, I guess I could show the median. Oh, I could just hit that button.
Yeah.
So look, oh sorry. Guys, what would I have to know about these angles in order to say that it must be a square?
They're all right angles.
They'd all have to be right angles. I don't know that for sure. So I put on there that it was a square, but
That's wrong. And that also False. rectangle should be.
what was that?
It also said rectangle in the answer.
Yeah, it could have been. So a lot of people answered parallelogram rhombus, which technically would have been correct, but it definitely wouldn't have been either a rectangle or square. I couldn't know because I should have. So it really should have been. It should have been yellow. Would have been the right answer. Okay. What else do you need to know in order to prove that JKLM is a rhombus? You know that its diagonals are perpendicular, and that's one of the conditions, but you also have to prove that it's a parallelogram. It's definitely not the shape is four sides, no. One interior angle is 90 degrees.
Probably be that.
Could be that one. One pair of opposite sides could be congruent, right? But maybe the other pair of opposite sides wouldn't be congruent. But if the diagonals bisect each other, that's a condition for a parallelogram. So if the diagonals bisect each other, then it's got to be a parallelogram. Does that make sense to you guys? I had to prove that it was a parallelogram. Okay? And because if I know that this is a parallelogram, God bless you, then I know it's a rhombus because the diagonals intersect at 90-degree angles. They're perpendicular. So I have to prove it's a parallelogram. Well, what's a condition for a parallelogram? That the diagonals bisect each other. If I know that the diagonals bisect each other, then I know that this is a parallelogram. Does that make more sense? Okay. A tough one. Find the value of x that makes the shape a rectangle. So we know that we've got two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. So we know this is a parallelogram. So what do I have to know about that angle if it's going to be a rectangle? What does that angle have to be? 90. Good. So I have to solve for x. If that's 90 degrees, I got to solve for x. So if it's 5x minus 10 equals 90, I add 10 to both sides. I get 5x equals 100. I divide both sides by 5. I get x equals 20. There you go. Faith in the lead. Answer the following question. This is one is a little bit different. It's kind of hard to see. That's a multi-step test prep one, or it's just a test prep question like on the SAT type thing. In parallelogram PQRS, PR and QS intersect at that point T. So the diagonals intersect at point T. One additional information is needed to conclude that PQRS is a rectangle. Look on your sheets and try and figure out what is one of the conditions for a rectangle. The diagonals are what? Congruent. So which of those will tell you that the diagonals are congruent? Okay, so if we take a look at this, how do we know that the diagonals are congruent? Well, PT is congruent to RT. Well, that doesn't help us. That just means this one is bisected, but that doesn't say that they're congruent. Okay? PT is perpendicular to QT. Well, that's not going to tell us it's a rectangle. That could tell us potentially that it's a rhombus, right? But if PT is congruent to QT, if PT is congruent to QT, well, if it's a parallelogram, I already know that the diagonals bisect each other, right? It's a parallelogram, so I know they bisect each other. So if this is congruent to this, then it must mean this whole thing is congruent to that whole thing, which means the diagonals are congruent. Does that make sense? Okay. So the key here is knowing these conditions. If you don't know the conditions, then you're flying blind. Does that make sense? But if you know and remember the conditions, then you're able to make educated kind of analysis on these different questions.
Like, three kids
Alright.
just walk into the bathroom with like these giant beakers filled with chemicals or something like
That's cool. All right, get results. Vyth, Olivia, and Ollie. Nice. All right, good job.
Wait, are you gonna do the point?
I'm a
What
winner.
would the points get a prize?
I'll take a picture of this.
Yeah,
I'll,
no,
if-
first place gets
if
50.
anything, I'll start after this next test because
Come on,
maybe
man.
people weren't taking it super seriously.
Hey, why don't you add 50 extra minute points?
I should just right now. Okay, guys, my CCA, you got your quiz. You know the deal. Go right ahead.
Wait.
For number one, is it asking if you can do both or something, or just? Okay. Like.
As in these ones where it's asking you, like, multiple names apply. For instance, if it's a rectangle, it's also a parallelogram, so you would never see rectangle just by itself. If it's a square, it's a rhombus and a rectangle and a square and a parallelogram. So that's why you're seeing multiple names like the same answers.
So then, like, it could be either one.
Well, like, for instance, like, basically saying is it a rhombus, rectangle, or square? Because those
Okay.
are- does that make sense to you?
So then,
Because if
rhombus.
it's square, then it's also a rectangle and a rhombus and a parallelogram. If it's a rectangle.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
So basically, it's just asking you, is it only a parallelogram or is it rectangle, rhombus, or square?
Okay.
And it's just applying all the names. Well, but you have to prove which one actually it is. So you have to talk about. Well, you gotta take a look. You gotta take a look and think is it. There's one thing, guys. If I can get everyone's attention really quick, or just if for that first one, too, like if it's a rectangle and a rhombus, then it's got to be a square, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a rectangle and a rhombus, remember that it is the square. That's what a square is. And I neglected to point that out earlier today, but I pointed it out a couple classes ago. So if it satisfies the conditions of a rectangle and it satisfies the conditions of a rhombus, then it's both a rectangle and a rhombus. The only way that's possible is if it's a square. Can you go to like previous question on these quizzes?
Yes.
You can?
Yeah.
You can? Like if you go to question 5, can you go back?
Yeah.
Okay. So on there's one. Has anyone submitted their quiz yet?
No, yeah.
Okay. So on I think it's question number 2. It's like you see that it looks like this. You can assume because of the way that it's drawn, you can assume that these two are right angles because one's a vertical line and the other one's a
For which one?
horizontal
Which
line.
one you got?
It's number 2, where like it looks like this or something.
So that's right angle.
You can assume that that's a right angle. Okay, and this, I don't know if it's always going to be that way.
Number
this
two,
one,
this is
this
a
one.
right angle. Number two, this is supposed to be a right angle.
The way that I wrote this quiz, that is a right angle in this place.
Wait, can we, the number five, can we assume that's a, perpendicular?
Because it says it makes the shape of a square. Well, this is square.
That makes sense. Get down to here, Colton.
I'll get hand sanitizer.
Just pack some stuff. Just ready to
There's no
go.
hand sanitizer.
There is no hand sanitizer.
If I get a
Well,
full
so
suit,
the
the rest of hand sanitizer in this room, and like, if I get a full suit,
Yeah. I don't know if they
Why don't they fill it up? Like, don't they
I
like
don't know if they actually go around and fill it up.
they fill it in other places? Why is it like not here?
I don't know.
Why do you request hand sanitizer? It's hand sanitizer.
Well, I guess maybe because the maintenance guys aren't necessarily walking around just like.
Those germs, why don't you use it?
Let's focus. Let's focus and take this quiz. I want to see lots of A's. Lots of 100%. And please ask the questions, guys. If you're confused about something, just ask the question.
Yeah, okay, I don't know how to do this one.
Okay, so if you know this is square, what is that?
We have homework?
No, it's gonna be on my computer.
What did you say? Oh, you from Canada.
Yeah, we don't have my class tomorrow.
Oh, so there's
Right.
Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can take.
And your homework's gonna be pretty easy today, anyway.
Hope we have to-
okay.
we have to have to-
I think I spelled all these wrong.
Oh, wow.
So I was looking it up and making sure it was good.
So that was number two, right? That, yeah. So was it square two?
I have a question.
Yeah, I did that on like when you do
That's one. Mr. Meteor, you have a lot
You
of
have fun
subscribers.
Almost.
That's a lot.
What website is that you watch the flash?
Oh, she doesn't do it. There's an app. There's an app.
I don't even know.
You have to have like advertising stuff.
No, wait, Mr. Meteor, is Chicago? Yeah. Thankful for every day.
I'm trying to find a website to watch the flash.
Oh, you download Tweetbox. Download Tweetbox. Alright, thank you guys.
Wait, Mr. Meteor, how does Chicago today's what is it? Or thankful?
Riverdale? Wait, did you watch the new season or whatever?
It might be
Life I'm living. Love this life.
I thought I'd like it, but then I started watching it.
Homework's on my CCA. Bye.
Yeah, the 16 is the big one. Yeah, but you don't play football.
I can buy a ticket.
You can't buy a ticket. It's free. You just show up and you have.
Sweet. I'll take a call. I'll take
Check.
one.
Why? You're gonna get a. You're probably gonna get like an offer from the school. You don't even know about it.
Bye bye. Have a nice day.
We come again.
Keep coming.
Last spot of the day.
Here we go.
Get through it.
You can do it, Brianna. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, there's only here. We can't do words. It's the last bucket of the day. Not conditions we do. Not.
Yeah.
Thank you. I did not understand these at all.
Yeah.
Can I take it, please?
Mhm.
Is that cool? Thank you.
Where are my quizzes?
Not too much just like that. Excuse me.
No,
Can I help you?
two. We have one lamp and one inch.
Victoria.
Who's the ball? Who's the ball?
Such a great ball. Everyone looks like parked up. Ask her to put up my.
Hi, Victoria.
For you? Dude, I don't know all. Yo, my boy, hey, you looking at your news starting? Whatever you are.
I have a question. I left my math problem. Can I follow along on the website?
You don't need your book today.
Alright, cool.
15.3 homework,
Okay.
because I was in your last class.
All right, let's see what you got.
Line one.
Nice.
And it was
Good. So now let's watch. 102 plus 135
Your boy
is
started. Your boy started.
237. So the longest this side could be is 237.
He's playing basketball.
No, he's a manager, but so
Is the
Okay, yeah, I
range-
didn't understand that question.
It's
I
because
thought it was asking me if
He's the best manager.
if the thing was a triangle, like if it would be a triangle if it doesn't like fit, or
Right.
if the hypotenuse isn't
Because the
long.
way
Is that what you
So
call it?
yes, I understand what you're saying. So look, if you're trying to find the length, the possible lengths of a third side, you subtract the two to get the first number and add the two to get the second, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, so that was
So-
the same idea? Oh,
Because in this
okay,
case, it's like you don't know what the side is, so you add the two to get how big it could be. It could be 237 would be
Okay.
the biggest it could be. So the biggest it could be is 237. Well, she can drive to 250, then she's fine. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes, that does.
Alright.
Okay, thank
Cool.
you.
You're good. Thank you.
Senior night, yeah. Well, we're playing,
Middle
first. What? So,
Here, why don't you?
they would like get to which we can go. So, it's, yeah, we can even do your
Nothing at all.
Okay, welcome everybody. I've got we got a kind of a fun lesson today, but before we get into that, I've got to come around and check your homework for lesson.
Logo on.
Oh, do I?
Oh, looks good.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you meant something's bad. It's all right. I'm growing it out, you know. So it's kind of in that mid between stage. It's a little bit awkward.
I wasn't here, so I didn't
What
do
does
it.
that mean? This homework was due like a week ago.
What?
15.3. You
What
probably
was
did
in
it.
the lesson?
What about 15.1, 15.2,
Oh,
and
I did.
15.3?
I did all those.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
the one
there
that
wasn't
you
a new
assigned last
lesson.
class, I didn't do. I wasn't here.
Oh,
I was
16.1.
outside helping.
Oh, whoops, I forgot. Yeah, I gotta check you guys like all your homework.
I did all
Oh,
of it.
that's
I know
right. It
it
was a short class. I gotta check 15.3 and 16.1.
I know what page was on because I was helping out.
15.3 and 16.1.
Sorry.
You're good. So this is 15.1. Good. All right.
15.3. That's 15.3.
Okay, 15.2. There you go. Nice. All right, so you just don't have the last one.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Okay. So I graded your quiz. I'm gonna let you retake it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. It's gonna be different. It'll be a little bit harder. I'll let you retake it.
Okay.
Okay.
And the video for the quiz is online, right?
Yeah. It's not really like a full-on review video. Like it's really class. No. Those three videos. It's 15.1, 15.2, and 15.3. And the 15.3 at the end of it says like what's on the quiz. It's not like a full-on review day, but it says like these are the subjects you have to know.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So
Like I spent
all
like,
of all of
if you watch
15.1
those
through-
3 videos,
they'll all help. They're on YouTube, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're already up there.
Okay. So what do you need?
15.1, 15.2, 15.3, 16.1. Whatever you got.
Okay, 16.1. Sorry, 16.1.
Yeah.
No, but you
We all have to go to the middle school.
Okay. 16.
That's
I mean
15.3.
15.3.
Good. And previous.
15.
15.2, good.
2.
And then
I don't think I
15.1.
did 1.
Okay.
No, I didn't do 1.
Okay, so you'll have to do that before you do the quiz just because I'll help you.
Okay.
Alright.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I haven't been, like, I wasn't here at the,
What about 15.2 and 15.3? You should have those. You probably do have those. Yes, yes, see? Good.
alright,
Alright,
this one?
that's 15.3,
What is
so
this?
15.2. 15.2, previous up, sorry. There you go. Good.
Is that
Good.
it?
Yep, that's it.
What was the one that was due today?
16.1.
That's what I don't.
Okay. Nice. Oh, very good. Good.
I don't know if it's all right, but I tried.
So, alright, don't worry about it. Did you get a protractor yet?
Yeah, I think I have one in my locker.
Okay, make sure you check because next class you're going to need it.
Okay.
Alright?
Yeah.
Guys, next class you're going to need your protractor. You should already have it. It'd be really nice if you did have one, but you got to have one.
Wait,
Trust
so
me.
what page number is it?
Ask my Block 2 class. You're going to want it.
Yeah, what page?
That's it. No, it's not. This is 15.3. That's 15.3.
Yeah,
That's right. I needed to check that.
Okay,
So
perfect.
then 16.1.
Yeah, I did. I didn't know.
Yeah.
No, I just already knew. I knew.
Jeez.
Wait, how?
No, he didn't tell me that. I just
Here we go. And then, yeah, 18.
You know what? You're just a stellar young man.
I try. I try.
You already checked my 15 point whatever, right?
Gosh, I have to just,
I know, I have like 2 different like grades, 2 different classes.
yeah. I'm going to have to bring them together.
Are those considered books?
I checked your, yeah, just show me 16.1.
I don't have that.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, bricks are like sand.
All right.
Those are like the
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Those are the
They're
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Very good. Nice.
Oh no.
Good. Nice straight lines.
I like yours.
I like
the nails.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Well, that'll work. Jenny. Okay.
So
Spoken like an athlete. It's not the correct answer, but I like that you're like thinking about it. You're like, just take your chances. Like, it's all good. Yeah, okay.
16. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I really didn't know what I was doing.
Okay.
But I did something.
Okay. All right, good.
Don't know
That's
what
all
it,
I asked
what
for.
it was that I did.
Okay. Did you understand the lesson?
When you went over, yeah, but it was like a 15-minute lesson, so I was kind of like,
Oh, that's right.
yeah.
It was very fast.
Alright,
All right.
time for the sad news, Mr. Mummer.
What's the sad news?
I only got a few of these done
What
for
about
16,
What about
16-1.
14?
Huh?
Let's go.
Yeah.
I still have zeros for 14.
14 what? 14-1?
For like everything
Yeah,
else.
14-1, 14-2.
I just haven't
Done any
been
of
here. No, I took the quiz last class and I never told you I wasn't here for the lesson before that. But I just took it. I felt good about it. So, but I just haven't been here like at all. So.
No, I know. So what do you have? Anything for me?
I do have 15-2.
Okay.
Not, and that's like the only one I have.
Okay.
15-2.
All right, you got to get up on it, Benjamin.
Yeah.
So I
I
want to
just
see you
I've
do
just
well.
missed a ton of stuff.
I know. I get it. I get it.
I know. I was in a rush this morning.
And you know what's gonna be awesome when at the end of the semester you're like straight A's on everything, and you're just gonna be like, had a rough start, but just like.
Did you see what I put for the bonus question of my quiz?
Oh, I don't remember it
It says what I learned
specifically.
about myself is that if you miss a lot of class, it's hard to catch up.
Oh, I didn't grade yours yet. Yep, that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
So which ones?
15.3 and 16.1. Yes, ma'am.
Oh yeah, I forgot to show you 5.2.
Okay, I'm missing 15.1, 15.2, and 15.3 from you.
15.3. Oh, this is 15.2. And you got 5 for 11. Then I did 12, 13,
Okay,
and 14.
that's good. Just show me quickly because you got a lot. 15.3. There you go. Okay. All right. And what about 16.1? Yeah. There you go.
I did all that. And I only got to 13.
Okay. Did you do 15.1? No.
Looks like I did not touch.
Yeah, you gotta do that one. Okay, Worsham left his computer at home.
Or my
That's what I
my
mean.
book, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't need to have the homework today, right? I wasn't here yesterday. Yeah, because I was doing it and then I left it at home. Taking the pass.
Good. Nice. Nice. Gotta get that protractor.
Yeah, I wasn't here, so I don't know what.
You weren't here in class? Yeah, I was in. Oh, that's right. That's why I was so confused. I saw you and I was like.
I was helping with the field day thing.
Oh, were you?
For the little kid, yeah.
I wasn't here yesterday either.
So do you have 15.3? Should have 15.3.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. It was due before the quiz, so most people did it. Hi. Good job, sir. Good job. And then 16.1. Good. Next. Very good. Did you see your grade on the quiz? 7.6. Yes. Good job, man. And you got almost all the multiple choice correct. Nice. Good. Very good, Kai. Good. Very good. All right, Anna. 15.3. Nice.
I'll do better next time. I screwed up.
Nice. Good. Gotcha. Yeah, module 16. It's units and modules. We're on unit 7, module 16. It's like, that's interesting. Thank you. Just, the thing is that this book is organized in a way, usually it would be like chapters, and the units are like chapters, and the modules are like sub-chapters. That's the best way to think about it. Which is still weird. But it's, it's fine. Good job, Julian. All right, Mr. Morgat, the time of reckoning has come. What do you have for me? I need all the way back from 14.
14, which one?
You're still a young man, but your voice is a little loud.
Probably during 14.
Yes. Good. 14.2.
Oh, we're doing now.
14.3. No. Okay. 15.2. Alright. So you got a few of them. Okay, so I'll give you 2 points for that one. 15.3.
Okay.
16.1.
Johnny just walks into the laundry. Okay, I know.
No, we're not different.
Yep. Good. Grace.
I'm missing a couple hours.
Okay, 15.2, 15.3, and 16.1.
You come in here like you know all about my life,
I
but you don't talk to me about
Charlie.
anything.
I'm so glad Charlie uses awareness. I'm really glad Charlie uses awareness.
And 15.3.
Yeah, he probably does. Yeah.
No, you just need to show me 15.3 and 15.
I literally
That's
hey,
15.2. You showed me that already.
You know my life.
No, that's not how it happens. You come over to me, you were like, Moy. No.
Good job, Grace.
You missed a very
Okay, Ron, now.
This is what you said.
Mr. Lewis. Yep, there you go.
Okay, this is what you said. You said you know someone has a job, so she has to figure out my SB.
16.1 is like
And I'm like,
way.
excuse me, but do you know? Are you in that relationship? Are you like the third wheeler? I don't think you are.
I think the pictures.
Okay, cool. Good. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that took a little while. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so thank you guys for hanging in here with me. We have. How you guys doing? How's everybody doing today?
I'm tired.
Good? You all right? Okay, it's the end of the day. We've been walking along the path of visualization, and we're going to continue along that path today. We're in Unit 7 still, Module 16, but check it out. We're not going to do 16.2 or 16.3. We're going to skip eventually to 16.4, but today we're going to kind of take a little bit of a journey into visualization. So it's going to be a little bit of a can't think of the word right now. Irregular? No. Not non-productive. Conventional, an unconventional lesson today, but I think it is going to be valuable, so I hope that you guys enjoy it. But before we get into that, I would like to just delve into the homework on dilations, because I think that I presented it to you, but I also left a lot of things pretty open-ended in terms of what to actually do, and it was like a 20-minute lesson, so it would be worth going over just the beginnings of the homework to make sure we're all on the same page. Get it? So let's all get on the same page, which would be page 832. And let's take a look. So number 2 and number 3 are basically asking, are they dilations? Well, let's look at number 2. Is that the same shape? Yeah. Is it the same size? Yeah, it's the same size, it's the same shape, so there's no dilation there. It's just a translation, okay? It's just a translation. Translation basically means it's a shift. What about 3? Is that even the same shape? No, so it's definitely not a dilation, okay? So that's that. Is the scale factor of this equal to 1/2? Let me actually record. Oh, I am recording.